Well, I'm going to dedicate this video to Tristan here, because if it wasn't for Tristan, I probably wouldn't be making this particular video, but I got a call from him. He said, "Grandpa, I want to know more about you as a boy." So, with that in mind, I will start back in Cabarton, Idaho, which no longer exists as a town, but where I was born. So we'll start there. And this is all that's left of Cabarton, just a sign and a shack. And I'm not even sure the shack is there anymore. So that's about it. And here I am with my dad. I'm about 3 years old. My brother Bob's about a year and a half. Out in the area behind our house where we used to live there. Some memories I have as a boy living in that little village of Cabarton, which was a company town owned by Payette Lumber Company, was the smell of skunks under our houses. Our house was built on skids, big logs, and you could haul this house, put it on a railroad flat car, haul it from one area up to another area, and then they'd haul it out with a tractor, place it in the field someplace. And that's kind of how the house that I was born in. That house is about 80 miles now from where I was born in it, up over the mountain, down into New Meadows on the other side of McCall. Had a mobile home even back in those days. It was enjoyable. Growing up as a kid, I remember the one time we had a railroad spur that came up fairly close to our house in the meadow behind where we lived, the railroad tracks back there, and there was a boxcar back there one time, and Bob and I went out, investigated the boxcar, climbed in it, and we found a pack of cigarettes. And so we decided to try it out, and lit a cigarette. I don't know where we got the match, but lit a cigarette. Both of us puffed away on it, and then we went back home afterwards, and Bob got so sick and he vomited, and Mother said, "Well, where you guys been anyhow?" "Oh, we've just been out in the meadow out there." We weren't about to admit that at the age of 5 and 3 we were smoking out in the backyard, or in the back area there. Anyway, then I remember another experience there in Cabarton. Some people came in. It was during the Depression, and they were just itinerant, just going through, trying to find their way, I guess. A group of about 10 people, and I walked over to where they were that afternoon, and they were getting supper ready, and their supper consisted of the dandelion leaves. They were starving, and that's all they had to eat was those dandelion leaves that they put in a pot and cooked them and then ate the dandelion leaves. I felt they were really poor, and I went home and told my mother, "We got some poor people over there." Well, we weren't exactly rich ourselves, but compared to those people without jobs just traveling through like bums through the area during the Depression, that was stark contrast to how we lived in a home and food every day. Felt fortunate. In the spring of the year, my mother would go down to the bridge down by the river, and there was a hot spring down there, and she would get this hot mineral water and bottle it up and bring it home. And apparently it had some good medical qualities to it. And then she would also make grape juice there in her house. There would be big bags of grapes dripping the juice down, hanging there. Remember, that was another thing that she made along with sauerkraut. One of my early memories of being a boy in that area was down by the company store. Occasionally the men would bring their dogs, who were fighting dogs, and they would have dog fights down there in front of the store. And that was a pretty, if you don't like dogs fighting, which I didn't particularly enjoy, and still to this day I have an aversion to dogs fighting because of seeing them attack each other out there with the men watching on. That was their entertainment rather than a movie on computer where violence. They used to engage in that kind of spectator sport. Well, that's a few ideas of my life in that small town back at that time. And I started the first grade there in Cabarton. One-room schoolhouse, probably about 50 kids in that one room. And the teacher had one teacher for all those 50 kids. And I remember I was seated clear at the back of the big room back in the corner. I don't remember anything about what was going on in that classroom. It was just a blur. Not an ideal situation perhaps to start school, but one day after school, the school let out my buddy and I, A.R. Campbell, who I grew up with for a number of years. He and I got out of school and we went down into the community down there where the little store was at the company store, and we went in there. It was my first time in there with him, and he walked up to the clerk and said, "I'd like some candy." And the clerk brought him out some candy, thanked him, said, "Put it on the account." Oh, put it on the, and that's all I had to say was, "Put it on the account." And we walked out, had that candy. Well, the next day I got out of school and walked down to the store and said, "I'd like some candy. Put it on the account." And the man gave me the candy and apparently did whatever was entailed in putting it on the account. And then about a month went by, and I did that a number of times. And I remember sitting there in the kitchen area, and my dad was going apparently over bills of some kind. And he made a comment. He said, "Candy? Candy? Candy?" Then he looked at me. Well, I found out that you don't get anything for nothing, that somebody's paying for it. And in this case, it was up to my dad later on. But anyway, that was my last candy on the account. Here's a photograph, 1960, of Cabarton out there where the green area is. And in the foreground there next to the car is our daughter Carol Leslie and our son David Chrisman. And then in the winter of 1933, Dad loses his job. In fact, the whole lumber town closed up. I was in the middle of the Depression, and there was just no selling of lumber. So they closed down the operations, and we moved to Cascade, and I started the rest of the first grade there in Cascade. After the Cabarton school, Cascade school was a huge place, and oh, what an improvement. The school unbelievably had a room for every grade. That was incredible to me at the time, the ending of the first grade. I can remember what an exciting time that first grade was for me, including the use of flashcards, having assemblies. In the corner of the room there was a table with a miniature farm that had cardboard animals and cows and horses, chickens. I remember students all singing, "Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O," and that went along pretty well. I don't remember the name of the teacher, but she was good. What a contrast to that early part of the first grade. School even faced the windows on our classroom faced to the east, so a lot of light coming in. Where the school in that first grade in Cabarton, there was no windows on the east side. It was kind of west. It was a dark school during the daytime. Well, that was an upgrade for me. My dad was quite fortunate to be able to get a job working as a bartender in what was called the Cascade Club there in Cascade. He later became part owner of that, so for about 6 years there he operated the club. And as a result of that, our financial situation apparently improved as a family, because I can remember about 2 years after we moved to Cascade, we had the biggest Christmas as far as gifts were concerned that I remember ever having as a boy. We got BB guns, bicycles, an electric train. What a memorable Christmas that was. This is a photograph of the Cascade Club that my dad owned while we lived there in Cascade. It's the building there on the right. Notice the cars, about 1935. Logging and lumbering was the biggest business in Cascade and its surrounding area, and so this was very much a part of our lives. And as boys, our activity was focused around trucks and logging, those kinds of activities. And we had a stream bed that flowed alongside of our house where we lived in Cascade, down by the main street. And as boys, we would go down there and alongside the house and build these logging roads along the bank of this stream bed. And they just went for a half a block down the street, and that was our play area. Not a sand table, but a whole half a block of that stream bed. And we built up and down intersections that were very complex and a very realistic type of reproduction from that area. At any rate, that was one of the activities we had going. Keep in mind that there was no television in those days, no cell phones, no smartphones, all we had were pretty dumb phones at that period of time, and they kind of, you hooked up, took the receiver off, put it up against your ear, talked on the phone that way. That was the kind of communications that we had back at that time. And they were typically not private, but they were public, more than one person one family on the same line. Something else that was different about life back at that time was the freedom that we had as kids growing up. For example, it wasn't unusual at all for my mother to pack me a lunch around 10 o'clock in the morning. I'd take off with my lunch and be gone for 3, 4, 5 hours, just hiking up in the woods around the town of Cascade, exploring the areas, all by myself. Come back later on, Mother asked, well, how'd it go? Fine, enjoyed it. Remember this little area that I had up on the hillside above Cascade, where you could climb up on these rocks, and kind of a concave area back there where you sit back into this kind of semi-cave and look out over all the area to the east, the mountains to the east, and the ranch land in between, and just think this was your area. And what was beyond the mountains over there? What was beyond them? That was a favorite spot. I could take you grandkids up there and show you that exact spot today, where I used to sit, and there were pine nuts that fell down from the trees, and you could crack those open and eat the pine nuts. So had your own food right there where you went to enjoy yourself. Well, that was part of that. Today, you know, your mother takes you here, takes you in the car there. You go to organized baseball here, organized volleyball there, all of this organization stuff. Whereas there, you were free. as a boy, you were free to explore, to go. Get on your bicycle, take off down 2 or 3 miles down the road, down toward Cabarton or over to the west toward the mountains. Free to explore. And that today is an unknown because of all the changes that have taken place in the society. But that's how it was when I was growing up. Well, gone on long enough. You're going to have to ask me for more, I guess, if you're going to get any more. But there's a lot more, of course, back there. Growing up for all of us is a different experience. And that was true back in my days as well. Yep, I would say the good old days when I was growing up as a boy. Thanks again for asking me. Bye now.